So there's all these different RVs, and they have all these different slide systems. How do you know which one's the best and which one's the worst? First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Josh the RV Nerd. Welcome to Bish's RV, and today I want to walk you through the most common slide-out systems used today in the towable RV market, because motorized stuff can be a little bit different. Today's video will really be focusing on the slide-outs used in the towable RV market. I want to show you what the systems are, how to identify them, their benefits and their drawbacks, and also give you a quick Cliff Notes version understanding of how you manually override one of these. So whether you're an existing RV owner and you just want to learn a little bit more about your RV, or if you're potentially shopping and you want to figure out which one of these has the hardware that best fits your needs, wants, desires, and preferences, I want to give you that information today. And if you appreciate how we do more than just sell you the next camper, help you learn about these things, whether you buy from us or not, or just educate existing owners, hit that subscribe button, like our video. This is a good one to maybe share to some various social media groups if you're willing. We'd really appreciate that. And let's get started. And real quick, as we get started, I want to mention that it's very possible for one RV to have multiple different slide systems applied to it. For instance, the RV that's on screen right now actually has 3 different slide systems because each system has different advantages, different drawbacks, and they're better in different places. So it can kind of depend a little bit. But the one that I want to begin with here is really the one that's the longest standing system used in the RV industry, and that's what's called a rack and pinion slide. You can identify it by just literally looking under the slide, and if you see that toothy ram bar that actually runs through the chassis frame rail right there, that's a dead giveaway. We have a rack and pinion slide. And when we start looking at a rack and pinion slide, there's several benefits that go along with it. And as we go through this video, I would very much like it if the people who have owned RVs with different slide systems, if you could leave a comment to share what type of system you've had and what your experience with it has been. I would love to hear that, because I don't want people just getting my input. And a lot of what I'm going to share in terms of the reliability factors of this video will be based on consumer input, stories that I've heard reported by existing owners. So in the case of rack and pinion slides, they are generally regarded as the best slide for reliability. They seem to be the slide out that, despite being an older system, it is tried and true, and it works the best, and tends to land you in the service center less often. Now, if you look down there, you might notice that how the slide floor of a rack and pinion slide pretty much matches up with the main floor of the RV. This is often referred to as a flush floor slide, even though most of the time in the RV industry, a flush floor slide isn't exactly floor flush, but pretty close. One of the other really cool things about rack and pinion slides is they tend to be regarded as the best for handling big, heavy weight. So really long, really deep slides like the one behind me, really heavy slides like in kitchens. Rack and pinion slides are often preferred by buyers because they do tend to handle the better weights that way. One of the other really cool things on rack and pinion slides, if the slides are closed and like you need to open a slide 6 to 8 to 9 inches or just partially to get past it, rack and pinion slides are one of the slide systems that you can do that and close it without knocking everything out of alignment. Well, one of the things I like to do in my videos is tell you the good with the bad. Every system has benefits and drawbacks. Rack and pinion certainly is no exception. One of the things is, due to its nature as a through frame slide, if you remember back to when we identified the slide, there's literally that bar with the toothy gears on it that goes through the chassis frame rail of the RV. That has a couple ramifications as a result. First of all, it means that part of the mechanism of the slide literally is fighting for space in the underbelly with things like your holding tank. So sometimes in some RVs, rack and pinion slides can limit your holding tank capacities or locations. The other thing is, because you've essentially punched a hole through the frame rail, you have potentially created a little bit of an access point for a mouse house. Not a big one, but man, they don't need a lot of space to get through, do they? Anyone who's ever had that happen, you know. The other thing here is, because we've punched a hole through the chassis frame rail, the manufacturers have to now use a taller, stronger chassis frame rail to compensate for the potential loss of structure. And as a result, that means that rack and pinion slide systems tend to be overall the heaviest because of the fact that they also have to ride on a bigger, thicker, heavier chassis. And they do tend to be one of the most expensive slide systems. Now, to give you a quick idea of how these are manually overridden, basically what you're going to do is, locate your ram bars, follow where they go into the RV, and then a lot of RVs that use these will have an enclosed underbelly. You will sometimes need to cut an access hatch into that underbelly enclosure to access the RV slide motor, at which point you basically put a ratchet, wrench, or like a power drill with a correct hex bit adapter on it to manually crank and close that sucker. Some brands like Jayco will tend to provide you with the access panel so you know where that's located to make it a little bit easier. And although it's rare, there actually is a version of an upper deck like bed slide rack and pinion system. So it's Rockwood's one of the few brands I've ever seen that in the modern market that uses it. But like, if you are on the outside of the RV, because that's how you identify most RV slide system, is what you can see outside. But if you look at it and you're like, I can't see any mechanism anywhere, what is this thing? Well, go inside the RV, lift up the bed in the slide out, and look under it. You will, if it's a rack and pinion slide, you'll tend to see something like this, where roughly 50% of the underbed storage space is occupied and blocked off. That's because that's where the rack and pinion mechanism is located. It's going through the upper deck frame rail as compared to the lower deck frame rail. A lot of manufacturers have stopped doing this in the modern market because you do lose storage. But again, this is generally regarded as one of the most reliable slide systems, and this is a Rockwood that we're looking at, and Rockwood tends to be a brand that builds for reliability. Next, I want to jump over to Schwintek slide outs. Schwinteks are easily identified by these silver bars with the little worm-shaped, curvy sort of design in the side of it, bolted right onto the face of the exterior of a slide out. Now, what's really funny is the advantages and drawbacks list on a Schwintek slide is almost the negative polar opposite of a rack and pinion slide. So, rack and pinions are heavy, these are lightweight. Rack and pinions are expensive. These tend to be one of the least expensive slide systems. An interesting thing too is it's a self-adjusting slide system. When you're opening and closing it, a lot of times when you get a rack and pinion slide, when it gets all the way open or closed, you start to hear the motor go brrrr. Sounds like a machine gun, or like an automatic stapler or something like that, which sounds like a machine gun. But the Schwintek slides are self-adjusting. You continue to push and hold your finger on the button until it absolutely stops and amps out. When the slide gets all the way to the wall, you'll actually hear it go. It is the slide controller communicating with the motors on both sides of the slide out to determine, are they both open the same amount? Are they both open all the way? Do they have the same pressure on the wall? Rack and pinion slides, you have to get like a shot to adjust those, or you got to know what you're doing yourself. The thing here too is because it's a fully above floor slide system, it does not have any sort of like fighting with the underbelly. It doesn't fight with the chassis frame rail. You don't lose potential holding tank capacity space or anything like that. You can also mount a Schwintek slide above a set of wheels on the RV, whereas a rack and pinion bar may not actually be able to fit there, because if you have a conflict with your running gear, physics says two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. You end up with a problem. The thing is, they are not without their downsides. I want to kick right off with really the big one. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument from the comment section that experienced RVers who have had Schwintek slides will probably echo this sentiment, that they are generally considered the least desirable slide system from the viewpoint of experienced RVers, largely due to a rocky service history, to put it pretty mildly. They've had some rough service history. The thing is, it's a really well-engineered slide system, but it has to be installed really well, and owners have to know how to operate it properly. And if any of those things don't go right, because very few owners are not properly educated on how to use it, like the hold your finger on the button until it amps out to self-adjust, most people don't know that. They don't know that you're not supposed to open a Schwintek slide partially. It's a slide system that should only be completely opened or completely closed in an ideal scenario. Now, if you do happen to open it halfway and then fully close it and let it go through a self-adjusting system sequence every now and then, you're gonna be okay, but you don't wanna make a regular diet out of that, because the left and right motors on the slide walls may not actually activate and actuate the exact same time or speed, and it needs to readjust itself pretty much every time you open or close it. And as long as you do that, it's not a problem. The other thing is, since it exists above the floor, it is not floor flush. Typically, it's what's known as a step-up slide, not even a toe stubber slide, but a big step-up slide where the base slide floor tends to exist, I don't know, at least 6 inches off the slide floor, if not more in some cases. So, like anything, there are some positives, there are some negatives to this. Now, overriding a Schwintek slide isn't necessarily difficult in theory, it's just that it can be an extremely laborious thing. What you essentially do is you actually reach inside, like you fish your fingers inside those slide seal flaps, you effectively disengage the motors, and then you literally physically push the slide in or out, whatever you're trying to accomplish, and then re-engage the motor system right there, so that you've essentially re-engaged a motor brake. So if you are trying to travel with the slide closed, it doesn't start to walk itself open. And in a sense, that doesn't sound awful, because these do tend to be small slides, but consider the fact that these are very commonly used in bedrooms, in the upper decks of fifth wheels, not just the lower decks of travel trailers. Trying to physically push that slide closed from the outside is not exactly an easy ask. Now from here we jump over to cable slides. The thing is, there are 2 varieties of cable slides, and this is one of the major reasons I wanted to update and refresh this footage. I already had a video out like this previously, but this is one of the things right after I made that video, a second type of cable slide system really jumped into prominence. And I don't know that everybody necessarily understands the difference between the two. So we're going to begin with the more classic version called Accu-Slide. Now, identifying which variety of cable slide system you're dealing with or looking at on an RV is actually pretty easy, but it seems to sort of escape a lot of folks. Again, just understanding that you're looking at some variety of cable slide system is easy, because obviously there's cables on these things. Well, identifying an Accu-Slide system is actually pretty easy. You find the slide out in question and actually either look or physically reach above the slide fascia right here, and here's what you're looking for. If you can see cables above the slide, or if you can feel the cables or what feels like a motorcycle drive chain, that tells you right there you're dealing with an Accu-Slide system. So what benefits does it bring to the table? Well, Accu-Slide systems are essentially made as an alternative to a rack and pinion slide system, so they share a lot of the same advantages, but not identical. That's why the systems are different. So it can be more of a floor flush slide out that doesn't have that annoying toe stub or toe kick. It's an above floor slide that is floor flush, though. I think it's the only slide system that has that designation of being both above floor and floor flush. So not only is it getting rid of the toe stub or toe kick, but it's also not punching the hole through the chassis frame rail, which means you can theoretically run it on a lighter chassis. You get rid of the mouse house. You're not fighting for holding tank space. You're not interfering with tire, suspension, and running gear. So there's a lot of different benefits there. It's also, as a whole, because it also doesn't affect the chassis and the physical hardware is lighter weight, it is a lighter weight and less expensive system all in as compared to a rack and pinion. But again, I'm going to hit with kind of the big thing first. When it comes to that reliability factor, Accu-Slides also have a rocky history. Now, this is a slide system that's been around for a long time, and it has gone through several updates and variations. When this system was first released to the RV industry, it was not ready, really, and it was problematic. So people who have some long-standing RV experience might be like, cable slides, I had one, never again, based on that. And I respect that. That was probably a very well-earned negative in their column at that time. Then they got better, but when they got better, the slide system, all the cables and pulleys and everything above and around the slide out stuck into the RV like 6 inches, and it looked very unsightly. Like the slide fascia around the slide looked really big and ugly and boxy, and some people didn't like that. So the slide system manufacturer was tasked to shrink its profile down, which they did. But when that happened, a couple oversights were made that caused it to, not if, but when, essentially fail the gearbox. The motor box in that thing was stripping out and failing out. And that 2015 to 2016 RV model year period was just frickin' ripe with that kind of activity. It was such a headache. And the problem was nobody knew it until like 9 months after these things were already sold and out in the field. It was a problem. Then they got better. What about today's market? Well, you're going to get a very mixed bag of feedback between people saying mine's been nothing but trouble and mine has had absolutely no problems. So I absolutely would love it if folks in the comment section chipped in on this. Now, moving on from there, the cables on the slide system, they will stretch with, especially on a heavy slide over time. This system is built with a tension adjustment so that as those cables stretch, you can pull the slack out of the line to keep the thing running the way that it's supposed to. One of the other things here is that just like a rack and pinion slide, an Accu-Slide system should not be sat in and occupied while the slide is closed. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to unload your fridge and your pantry. Manufacturers account for storage they place there. What they don't account for is a human body that they did not put there. There's a difference. So how do you manually override one of these? Well, any Accu-Slide tends to ship with this little thing right here I call the baby shake weight. And basically, it's something that you would attach like an 18-volt power drill. There's a little spot over the, when we looked over the top of the slide, identifying the slide out, there's a spot where basically you attach this right on there and you take the drill and zzz, and you run the thing in and out. The other thing is if you sit here and you shake this and you maintain eye contact with your RV guests, it's like a dominance establisher kind of thing because it just looks weird and creepy. Anyway, but the thing is, there are some floor plans, like this is not an example of what I'm about to describe. There are some floor plans that maybe they have opposing slides. And if you close both of those slides with the baby shake weight, you are trapped in between the two slides and have to kind of climb out a window. So there are some floor plans where, yes, it has an override, but nobody thought about actually using it. So that's one of those things where you need to use your dipstick, Jimmy, and that frickin' hurt. So now what about the other type of cable slide? Because they're both made by the same manufacturer, but this is the exact slide system. At a glance on the outside, it looks pretty much the same. Now, identifying this one, you can kind of cheat because this system is viewed more positively by the public. They do tend to market it a little more, and sometimes you'll see these little blue and white stickers that say, hey, this is Exact Slide. But what if you can't find those? Well, identifying an Exact Slide system if you can't find the blue and white cheater sticker is actually pretty easy. You essentially do the same thing as an Accu-Slide. Reach above the slide out here, and if you don't feel any cables, if you don't feel any of that motorcycle drivetrain, but you can see cables on the outside of the RV, that's how you know it's an Exact Slide system. Because the thing is, this was largely designed as a substitute, an alternative for RV manufacturers who had already built and engineered floor plans who perhaps wanted an alternative to a Schwintek system. That's really what Exact Slide is. It's largely an alternative to a Schwintek slide. Essentially what you have is a motor on the left side of the slide with cables and pulleys and a motor on the right side of the slide with cables and pulleys. It's actually like a two-piece and a biscuit system as compared to like being all looped together. So as a result, this system has largely turned in better service records as compared to what a lot of manufacturers have found and what I've found a lot of customers experience as compared to Accu-Slide or Schwintek, again with rack and pinion largely being considered the king for reliability. It is a very lightweight system. It exists above the floor. It doesn't interfere with your holding tanks. Again, it's all the benefits that go with that above the floor slide system, like we've already talked about a few times here. Like a Schwintek slide, it is self-adjusting, where if you hold your finger on the button until it goes all the way out or all the way in, and you hear, and then it goes, and it dies. You're not burning out the motor when you do that. It literally just amps out, and then you just let go of the button. Everything's fine here. One of the other really cool and rare benefits of the Exact Slide system is it's one of the only slide systems in the towable RV industry where you may have the potential of sitting in and occupying that slide out while it's retracted. But again, there's downsides to everything. The public opinion of the Accu-Slide system tends to be a bit of a mixed bag. I think part of it is because people see cables and due to some of the history of Accu-Slide immediately go, nope, I see a cable, I'm done that quickly. And I'm not going to try to convince you out of that. There's enough RVs out of there. You should always buy according to your peace of mind. But I think that a lot of the negative perception of Accu-Slide is based on exposure to its sister, the Accu-Slide system, right, wrong, or otherwise. And certainly not to say that there haven't been some Accu-Slide units with problems. I've seen it, but generally speaking, my experience with it has been one of the better ones. Now, because it is an above-floor slide system, that means that it does have at least the toe stubber. Unlike the Schwintek slide system, which tends to exist at least 6 inches above the floor, this tends to be right above the floor line. So again, I call it a toe stubber, not a step-up slide. One of the other things here is that, like a Schwintek slide, due to the fact that it has a motor on the left and right sides of the slides that are trying to communicate through a controller, there's always a little bit of something being slightly out of sync until the slide gets fully opened or fully closed. So as a result, it is a slide system that should only be fully opened or fully closed. It's not ideal to partially deploy one of those. So how do you manually deploy one of these things? Well, because this is kind of like a Schwintek slide in that you have a left side and a right side, you essentially have to do 2 overrides at basically the same time or stutter step back and forth between them. At the upper quarters of the left and right sides of the slide, where in this little picture you see the somebody poking their finger down into a hole, that's the top of like the left side motor, and there's the same thing over on the right side. You remember that the baby shake weight from the Accu-Slide thing that I waved in your face and gave you the creepy look and licked my lips doing? Well, you're going to do the same thing here, but if you're alone, what you have to do is run one side in a little bit, walk over here, run that side in a little bit, then walk back and forth, and you essentially are going to walk the slide in. Now, if there are 2 of you, and you have 2 drills, and you can kind of talk and eyeball the thing to make sure you're going the same speed, in theory, 2 people could do it together at the same time with a little coordination. Now, those 4 systems, rack and pinion, Schwintek, and the 2 cable slide systems, those are by far and away the 4 most commonly encountered within the towable RV industry. But recently, a couple newer things, or at least one that's not used very often, have crept into the industry. The first one I want to talk about here is called a power gear slide system. This is actually a system that was essentially adopted into a limited number of towable RV brands from the motorized market, and we're going to get into some of the why later. First of all, to identify it, when you look at the outside of it, at a glance it looks like a rack and pinion because you don't see cables, because you don't see the Schwintek bars on the side, but if you get down below it, you don't actually see the rack and pinion ram bar system. The thing is, this system is kind of similar actually to the rack and pinion bed slide system that we peeked at in that one Rockwood earlier in the video, but with a couple awesome benefits. So again, if you don't see the Schwinteks, if you don't see the cables, and if you don't see anything underneath it, take a step inside. You will probably see something like this, where there is a big, hefty, chunky step above the main body where you step up into the slide out. And at 1 or 2 places, you'll see these little brackets kind of sticking down there. If you can spot that stuff and identify that, that's how you know you're looking at a power gear slide system. I will tell you first and foremost, I'm more of a towable specialist, but when I asked the manufacturer, why did you switch to this? They said, because we needed something that could be an above floor slide that had much better reliability records than what we had in the past. And when they looked in the motorized market, they found that was the case. Now, here's the thing. Because it's a motorized slide out, one of the key differences between a towable RV and a motorized RV is that motorized RVs are built with the idea that there will be a person inside the cabin physically occupying it and using it while the slide's closed while you're bouncing down the road. Towable RVs are not made with that expectation. That's why towable seating doesn't have seat belts and motorized seating does. Like that right there should give you a quick understanding of a key difference between the two. But because this is a motorized slide system, This is a system that can handle somebody sitting in it or laying in it while it's retracted, which again is a very rare thing because there's almost no external hardware. This has less exterior weather exposure versus any other slide system essentially. It all pretty much exists inside the slide floor. Now again, that means that we have that step up, but it also means that the slide is always supported on the inside edge, whether it's out or whether it's retracted. That is rare and that is cool. But again, every slide system's greatest asset is its greatest liability. All those cool things means it has this big, boxy, step-up, toe-bashing, trip-you intrusion into the RV that while the slide's closed in some floor plans may also prevent things like bathroom doors from being able to open and access. So again, everything has its ups, everything has its downs. It's a medium weight, it's a medium cost slide, so there's no real significant impact there to move the needle one way or the other. The biggest downside to this is just that it really is one of the most intrusive systems out there in the industry. And there's a lot of folks like, hey, man, if it's a big step up like that, no thanks. Now, I've never done it, but I watched a video on how to do it. They make it look real easy in about 2 minutes. Manually overriding a power gear system looks like it sucks. So like underneath of this thing, there's literally like a little zipper access panel. Then you have to take like a shop razor and cut into, like up into an access hole to get you to the slide motor, and then cut into the linoleum of the slide floor, which sounds awful. I get it. It's all in a place that you don't see when you're inside of the RV, but it sounds terrible. Then you have to like reach up and disconnect the wires from the motor, turn the brake off the motor, and then you have two different options. You can either somehow get a ratchet wrench up in there and crank the hex nut on the motor itself, which is going to take forever. Like the manual override on a rack and pinion slide, I bet it's like a 50-to-1 ratio in terms of cranks. I've done it twice in my career. I hope I never do it again because it took several of us a while rotating between it. Or once that brake is disengaged, you can literally just get a couple people and physically push it closed. Now, it's probably gonna be a bit of a workout. After that, you have to re-engage the brake, so again, the slide doesn't walk its way open while you're trying to get the thing to a service center or something like that. Again, I've never done it. I hope I don't have to, because it sounds like it sucks on these. But again, service records kind of indicate you don't seem to have to do it a lot. Now, in my past video, I made a separate designation for a Happy Jack slide system. Happy Jack is kind of a name brand. It's a variety, actually, of a power gear slide system. So this is just kind of two different people essentially make the same system. But this RV right here gives me the opportunity to actually see a little bit more of the hardware. Because where the last camper had a big box underneath of it that made it hard to get to all the stuff, this one is pretty obvious. So that the Happy Jack variety of power gear slide system, you don't have to cut a hole through the floor to get to the motor, to get to the control module, that black box against the wall. But at the same time, when you just have like a little bit of a curtain hanging down over a sofa, it also doesn't look as flashy and fancy and finished either. But it's just, again, a different variety of power gear system with the same advantages and drawbacks in general. Now, unrelated, messing with a couple of these jackknife sofas in these RVs today, it turns out some of the framework under it is jackknife sharp. I sliced myself open pretty good today, but hey, that's showbiz, baby. The show's got to keep going on. I want to give you a couple quick reminders here. Or first of all, just a note. Today's video, again, is very much focused on the towable RV segment. Some motorhomes will follow some similar slide system. There is a little bit of an overlap, kind of like the power gear system that we talked about. Some Schwinteks are used in motorized, but motorized does tend to have some other systems that are also built by their own rules. Like there's some manufacturers that literally have created their own proprietary slide system. So this is not intended to be entire RV industry encompassing. The other thing I also want to mention is anytime you're doing any sort of override, it's always best practice to disconnect the power line from the slide motor before you start manually overriding anything. And a couple of these actually have, motor brakes you have to turn off. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look up the slide out override video instructions from the manufacturers who make these things, and I'm going to leave those links in the video description for you, so that if you are curious about a more detailed override, if that's one of the reasons you tuned in, you will be able to locate that. So double check that in the video description section there. One last little note for you. A question I see all the time in like various RV groups and whatnot is, what about those slide support stands, those jacks that you can put under slide outs? Do you recommend those? And at this point, at this time of the RV market, my answer is basically no. I absolutely do not think you should use those things. And I'll give you the real quick Cliff Notes version why. I've done a full video kind of touching on that before. But if you look at that slide out, it's hanging out over thin air. Its three-dimensional position in this reality is relative to the body of the RV itself. Now, if the RV rocks and moves around for any reason, whether it gets hit by a heavy wind, whether the ground is soft and the jacks settle and the position of the RV changes a little bit, if you isolate the movement of the slide separate from the body to which it is relative, you are causing something to either crunch or unseal, and you are causing problems. So I just do not recommend those. Now, we could sell them to you. We could make money, sell them to you, and I'm recommending don't buy those things. So I hope you appreciate that our goal with this is purely to educate you and not just to try to get you somehow. You know what I mean? And today's video really came at your request. I had a lot of questions asking the difference between like Accu-Slide and Accu-Slide. I thought I need to update this footage and get that back out there. So if you appreciate this, if you've liked this, again, please feel free to share this into any social groups where it might be handy for you. But beyond that, drop me a little like on the video, or at least just like a quick little thanks if you're willing. You know, I'd just love to know that you appreciate the efforts here today. And remember, I will leave you some links in the description. I'll leave you links to any of the slide out override videos from their suppliers that I can locate. I'll leave you links to the thing where I talked about slide jack stands and do's and don'ts and stuff like that. And if you appreciate how what we're doing here is not just trying to sell you the next camper, but trying to teach you how to fish or to help you camp better with your existing RV, hit that subscribe button and catch us when we roll the next one out. And I want to hear from you. Are there other topics or questions you'd like me to put into a video format like this? Please let me know and I'll do my best to make that happen. So until next time, take care, stay safe, have fun, and happy camping, everyone.